isn't that true though? That before God uses a man or woman or a vessel greatly, he must first crush him deeply. I think what we do is we have a theology for being filled, but we don't have a theology for being emptied. It's I got a lot of thoughts on this, but I'm gonna talk to you straight out of Ziklag. Come on, not straight out of Compton, straight out of Ziklag. Here we go. It says in 1 Samuel 30, and we're gonna read about verse 1. It says, now it happened when David and his men went to Ziklag on the third day that the Amalekites had invaded the south and Ziklag and attacked Ziklag and burned it with fire, and had taken captive the women and those who were there from small to great. And they did not kill anyone, but carried them away and went their way. Just for the record, this was already something unusual. The Amalekites were very aggressive, very violent people. And the Amalekites didn't just attack you, they attacked you in a way where it demoralized you. They tried to find whatever your weakness was, what would play and literally play and prey, P-R-E-Y, upon your greatest fears, and they would find it. So typically they would kill women and children and leave the men just kind of thinking, oh my God, and then they would go after the most severe warriors, and your thought is if they could do that to them, what could they do to the rest of us? So they did whatever they could do, and they just kind of kept coming back. They were like, I don't know, the Borgs, on Star Trek, if you remember that far. But it's interesting, they didn't kill anyone. So you could already see, man, God, your hand must have been in this. It says, so David and his men came to the city, and there it was, burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters had been taken captive. Then David and the people were with them, lifted up their voices and wept until they had no power to weep. And David's two wives, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, Abigail, the widow of Nabal the Carmelite, had been taken captive. Now David was greatly distressed, for the people spoke of stoning him, because the soul of all the people were grieved, every man for his son and daughter. But David strengthened himself in the Lord. We're going to read just a couple more verses. Then David said to Abiathar the priest, Ahimelech's son, please bring me the ephod, or please bring the ephod here to me. Very, very important right there. That's that thought. It's going to be the hinge point. And Abiathar brought the ephod to David. So David inquired of the Lord, saying, shall I pursue these troops? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for you shall surely overtake them all, and without fail recover all. Right when I had given my life to the Lord, and I've shared this with you, right after that I had this series of visions of the Lord where I knew I was called to a vocational ministry. We're all called to full-time ministry, but this was what I was going to do. And so I set down my computer engineering degree, which is still collecting dust on a shelf someplace in our house, and I went into this internship. I mentioned the other time I got saved on a college campus, secular college campus, and so this secular campus ministry had an internship, and I began to train in this internship. Right during that time, we had to read different books, and I remember still one of my great authors that I love. I had to read a book by A.W. Tozier. A.W. Tozier's no joke, y'all. Y'all, if you've never read a book by A.W. Tozier, read a book by A.W. Tozier. I got a hand over there. I remember reading someplace as I was just having some time in my apartment. I'm interning. I'm living off 7 packs of Top Ramen for $1 and Food for Less because I didn't have a lot of money. I had to raise my own money, and I didn't have a lot of relatives that were saved, so I was just trying to do what I could. It was very much like YWAM. You had to raise your own support to go to the internship, and then once you became a campus pastor, you had to raise your own support like a missionary. We were campus missionaries, so there was no salary. So in my thought, I'm taking this vow of poverty, man, and so, I'm starting to get into this. And so literally, in this internship, we're in the first couple of weeks, right? And so I'm reading this book by A.W. Tozier, and as I read this line in the book, it said, before God uses a man greatly, he first crushes him deeply. To which I picked up the book and threw it across the room, right? Hit the wall, fell, and I went and picked it up. But isn't that true, though? That before God uses a man or woman or a vessel greatly, he must first crush him deeply. I think what we do is we have a theology for being filled, but we don't have a theology for being emptied. If I'm a waiter or waitress and I come by your table and I see your coffee cup still has coffee in it, I'm probably not going to fill up your cup. It's when I walk by and I see it's empty, like, oh, you finished your coffee, you're ready for the second, dose. I feel like we have this theology for being filled. God, fill me, fill me, fill me. But we don't have one for being empty. So all of a sudden, a season like we have just experienced comes, where it's a season where God is emptying us to fill us again. And I'm telling you what we are. We're in Acts 3, between Acts 2 and Acts 4. In Acts 2, Pentecost, birthing of the church. Acts 4, threats came out. They went to the upper room because of the threats of the stuff that happened in Acts 3, right? And all of a sudden, they're filled afresh, and God stretched forth his hand to heal, sent forth signs, wonders, and miracles. Acts 4, I believe it's like 30, 28, 29, 30, 32 there. And so I feel like we're in this place where we're getting ready for a new Azusa Street. We're getting ready for a new upper room encounter. We're getting ready to be filled because we're being empty. Whenever in your development, in your walk with God, that you see that you're being emptied, you ought to clap, jump up and down, and get as excited as when you're getting filled, because when God empties you, he empties you to fill you. So I read that, little did I know I was about to go into my Ziklag, and this is going to be a metaphor for exactly where you and I are at right now. Right as I was going to this internship, I was engaged to a gal that was also going through the internship, and we were going to be campus pastors together, which I'm so glad God did what he did, because I got this beautiful woman right here in the front row. God really loves me. I've outkicked my coverage. God gave me Krista Smith. All of a sudden, as we're starting off the internship, she takes off the rings and gives it to me and says, I don't want to go through this. And so it crushed me, because I'm like, and man, so I'm crushed. I'm devastated, as anyone would if you're engaged with someone and without explanation. And the truth be told, I was first hearing about it from other people before the word got to me. Like, my leaders were coming to me like, well, Sean, and then I'm like, oh my God, what's going on here? Same time, my last living grandparent died, right? So I hear the story of this, and it was very connected, because the last living grandparent that died was my dad's mom. My dad was murdered when I was 9 years of age, and so it was a connection to my dad's side of the family. And then right after that, my mom says, you're serious about going through this intern and do this ministry stuff? I say, yeah, Mom. She says, well, if you're going to do that, I disown you. So within 3-day period, come on, 3-day period, my fiance dumps me, my last living grandparent dies, and my mom disowns me. I'm sitting in this intercessory thing, which, by the way, there was only 4 of us, and one of them was my ex-fiance, and we're having to all pray together. I'm sitting there weeping, and I'm weeping to where I have a track mark of a rash down my face. I don't know if you ever had. I wept to the point where I couldn't weep anymore. Somebody say Ziklag. It's so funny, because when I think about grief, all of us process grief in different ways. No one is on your same track as to how they process grief. You really can't try to judge someone else in their sorrow and their grief as to why they cry the way they cry. I remember my grandmother telling me stories when Dr. Martin Luther King passed. She wept and cried, because as a Southern African-American grandmother, mostly African-American, a little bit of Cherokee Indian in her, enough to get them cheekbones, my grandma Ethel. By the way, my grandma Ethel Lee didn't play, right? You know how parents today will give their kids timeouts? Like, my grandma didn't have the ministry of timeout in our apartment in my home growing up. My timeout was when my grandmother got tired of whipping me. She was ambidextrous. When she got tired of whipping me with her right hand, she would switch the belt to her left hand. I got a timeout in between the handoff between the right hand and the left hand. That was my timeout. So just letting you know. I remember in that point in time how that impacted my grandmother. She described it, because there was so much hope and so much of literally the struggles she went through growing up in the South, and then being in Michigan, and then coming to California. I remember my mom talking about certain entertainers she grew up with, and there's certain ones that passed and died, and how that impacted her, or different ones. And I just remember that. And then in my own kind of era and time. I don't know if you remember, Kobe Bryant passed away, I think about a year ago in a helicopter crash. And it's interesting because I'm saying a lot to connect to this. Kyle Kuzma, who was his teammate, is still a professional basketball player for the Los Angeles Lakers. It's interesting because Kyle Kuzma, it was said, at the news of Kobe's death, he said he cried till his eyes couldn't produce any more tears. In Ziklag, the Amalekites strike this base of where, at this point in time, for somewhere between a year to 2 years, David had made Ziklag his base because he's a fugitive, because King Saul has hired, mercenaries to kill David. David, in the midst of this, somewhat is, and scholars would agree, this is a bit of a compromised decision. He allies himself with the Philistines. He should have never have made that alliance, right? He should have never made that alliance. So while he's doing it, he's fighting for the Philistines, hiding from Saul. In the midst of all of this, let's just run down his life, right? He's separated from his own mom and dad at this point. His brothers, Scripture lets us know, last time they saw him, they accused him of being full of pride and insolent in his heart. His first wife, Michal, peace out, deuces. She's given to another guy. He has to, in a sense, hug and let his best friend Jonathan go because of the cancel culture of his dad. The king that he served threw knives at him, is now trying to kill him. He had joined with the Philistines, but the Philistines said, we can't trust you. So now the Philistines let him go. The guy is in this position where he's coming back to his home place, expecting to find something familiar, family. He sees some smoke, but that don't look like the barbecue grill. Come on, somebody. The enemy had come and torched Ziklag. He goes. He finds out everything is stolen. Come on, his Nintendo Switch, stolen. Come on, somebody. His big, huge LCD 5K television, gone, right? His entire cookbooks from Chip and Joanna Gaines, right? Magnolia Farms. I'm sure he didn't have a cookbook by them, all right? His old Bonanza DVDs starring Lorne Greene. Come on, somebody. And the 4 Horsemen of the Cartwrights. It's gone. So all this prized possession, but that probably wouldn't have mattered. Y'all looking at me like, man, you covered almost every era in person here, purposely. But his wives and children are gone. But that's not all, folks. Bad infomercial. His own men cried till they didn't cry anymore. They understand that level of grief that we're talking about. This is what Ziklag happens. Ziklag is one of those moments where you're fighting one battle, and while you're fighting one battle, before you can complete that battle, it's like another battle jumps in on it. You ever see that old thing where it used to be on the old entertainment shows where a person would spin a plate on a stick and then they get another one going and they get another one going, another one, and then all of a sudden this one got wobbly, so they had to run back and get that going, and this one got wobbly, and the rest of the exhibition was them running on wobbly plates. It's like we got our marriage going, we got our finances tight, we feel our health is in place, our kids are doing good, and then that gets wobbly, and that gets wobbly. But in Ziklag, all the plates start to fall, no matter, it's like you can't get to them quick enough. Anybody ever been in a Ziklag before? Here's a place where I believe you lose expectation. And it's a funny thing about grief. This past December, my mom she had been battling for some time. She'd been battling dementia. And praise God, there was never a point where she didn't recognize her only son, Sean. She'd recognize, but she'd ask a lot of questions over and over, and she'd repeat herself, and you could tell that there was slippage. She had a roommate that was a friend of hers that came and stayed, and my mom actually allowed her to stay to help her out, but of course she was able to keep a set of eyes on my mom. Just got to the point to my wife and I just assessed the situation. We realized, you know what, we probably need to put my mom in a senior facility, and I wanted to allow her to stay in her own place as long as possible. And my wife helped me do this. My mom, everyone here knows what I'm talking about, just the love that you have for the woman that birthed you. About a week after we got her in, she's thriving. She looked as good as she's ever looked. My wife took her out and bought her some awesome clothes. We got her hair done. Even the women in the senior care facility is like, man, your mom is such a breath of fresh air. She's able to carry on conversations. She looks cute too. I love her little outfits. And it was rocking. And then all of a sudden, about a week later, after a ministry trip, we're back. We get a call, 3 a.m. in the morning. And they said, your mom was found unconscious. We had to send her down to this particular hospital in the Bay Area where we live. We immediately hopped in the car, and by the time I saw my mom, all the tubes and everything, and then they're trying to, she's not responsive, but they're trying to use the defibrillators to start her heart, and they're doing it, and they're looking at me like, it's a pretty violent thing at this point. They said, we might break some ribs. We could keep trying if you want. And then all of a sudden, you're in that place where it's like, God, I don't know if I can make the decision on them continually to try to resuscitate my mom or for them to give up. And it just felt like 2020. This happened this past December. It's just like, this is a year of HE double hockey sticks for real. This is a Ziklag. And I know my story is not that unique in the sense that I believe that there are a lot of people that have felt death, that have felt loss, that have felt losses in different areas. And some people dreams and visions, and some people connections and relationships, some people jobs, some people even in the midst of the pressure that come on. As we'll see, sometimes you don't make the best decisions, and some of us are mourning bad decisions in situations we found ourselves that we feel that we're in this place. David felt like, okay, these men have a right to want to stone me because I'm the one that led them into the alliance with the Philistines. I'm the one that's out fighting the wrong battle, and while I'm fighting the wrong battle comes to our home, and maybe David felt responsible. My mom would pass, and in a whole Christmas season, I go through that first Christmas without my mom, and there's a lightning bolt of aloneness that strikes you when your mom dies. I don't know if anyone knows what I'm talking about. And I remember feeling this zigzag. I remember just feeling like this numb thing and this grief. David had to feel all alone. And sometimes serving the Lord, you feel like that. And I know this is a different kind of message, but please stick with me because I promise you about 10 minutes from now, we're going to get it positive again. But I think the truth be told, that sometimes we have to have a theology for being emptied. But you got to understand something. You don't quit in the emptying process when you understand there's a God that empties only to fill. Oh my